We should be going live on Facebook. I'm just going to double check that it's working.
Okay.
Have we had any favorite specimens from the Discovery Lab or anything yet?
Not yet, but if you visited the lab before, or I see some volunteers as well, do share what's your favorite specimen.
Yeah, just type it into the chat.
We are live on Facebook, so Kashifa, feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Awesome, great. So hi everybody, thanks for joining us. My name is Kashifa. I'll be leading us into, I'll be talking about the Discovery Lab and some of its specimens, but I'll hand it over to Vincent first to give us a little intro.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this week's Beaty at Home. Yes, and Kashifa will be leading us on a tour of the Discovery Lab. So welcome everyone. And yeah, as mentioned, if you have any favorite specimens, let us know in the chat. And if you have any questions during the Beaty at Home talk, of course, just type it into the chat, whether you're on Zoom, which I'll be checking, or Facebook, which Nicole will be checking. So yes, Kashifa will be leading us today. She is, of course, a museum interpreter. So she is very familiar with these specimens. I'm sure some of you are as well. So this will be a great opportunity for those of you who maybe have been away from them for a while, or those of you who have never seen them before to get to know them. And so where are we? Well, the Beaty Biodiversity Museum and UBC, which is a part of, are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. So if you do want to learn more about that, you can just go to www.musqueam.bc.ca. Here you see the Musqueam flag. It was raised at UBC last year in 2019 on February. Oh, that's the wrong direction. And yeah, so if you haven't been to the museum, here is a map of where we are. We're located in Vancouver, BC. We're on the UBC campus. And we're right across from the Earth Science Building, next to engineering. We're close to education. There's a number of museums, galleries, and gardens here on campus. So definitely visit our friends at the Museum of Anthropology, Pacific Museum Earth when they're open, the Botanical Gardens, the Belkin Gallery, the UBC Farm, and there are more of virtually available things and sites, and hopefully more in person will soon be opening up. Here is the outside of the museum. I'm actually back inside here for the first time in a while, so that's nice. And we hope sooner than later we'll be able to see some of you as visitors for coming soon. Of course, our big blue whale. That is our sort of halo specimen. Kashifa will be guiding you through several just as interesting, maybe a bit smaller specimens that we have in our Discovery Lab. So this is what you'd see when you first show up. And yeah, we'll be opening our grand reopening, of course, with a few social distancing differences starting the 21st. Right, is that right? Yeah. I'm good at math. And it's 10 to 5. And let's see, here is, we're looking at our Biodiversity Research Center. So we are attached to this building where the curators, the researchers do their research on all kinds of biodiversity research, so ecology, evolution, taxonomy. You see it all there. It's a lot of amazing research going on here, and it's pretty cool to be attached to them, literally and well, metaphorically. And of course, our collections are made up of many different kinds of specimens. So we've been open to the public since 2010. So it's been 10 years. It's our 10th anniversary. But the herbarium itself has been at UBC for much longer, as have the other collections. The herbarium, for example, is about 100 years old. And some of them were collected prior to that. So we have some herbarium specimens that were collected in the late 1800s. 95% of our specimens are actually in the exhibit space. So our actual museum floor has lots of these cabinets, which is unique because usually most of them are kept behind the scenes at natural history museums. So in this photograph here, you can see our fish collection. So the museum's cared for by keeping the specimens in 6 different collections. Although the specimens are all very different and unique, all of them help us understand biodiversity of the past, present, and future. So real specimens and the data associated with them is critical to biodiversity research. So we have our cow and tetrapod collection. So these are vertebrates with 4 limbs. So those mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, or in the case of snakes and whales, interesting in that they don't have 4 limbs anymore, but they are descended from 4-limbed vertebrates. Then we have our marine invertebrate collection. So these are ocean-dwelling animals with no backbone. So this is actually one of the most diverse of our animal collections because you've got different kinds of worms, sponges, jelly, sea stars, crustaceans, many, many more. Our herbarium, it is the most diverse collection because it's got bryophytes, vascular plants, but then outside of plants, we also have all kinds of algae and even fungi and lichen. We have our Spencer entomological collection, which has terrestrial arthropods, so lots of insects, also other terrestrial arthropods like arachnids, like spiders, and then other ones like millipedes, centipedes. We have our fish collection, so these are all the aquatic vertebrates that use gills to respire. And then last but not least, our fossil collection, which is managed by the Pacific Museum of the Earth, which includes fossils of all types from all eras. So just an example of the over 2.1 million specimens that we have here at the Beaty Biodiversity Museum, some of which Kashifa will be able to show to us. And they're physically stored in the museum for researchers to access, to care for, and to send into the future and for public display. So we offer virtual tours and of course our Beaty at Home programs like the one we're doing right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Kashifa to give us a tour of the Discovery Lab.
While you still have that slide up, I think I'll point out where the Discovery Lab is on this map.
Ah, excellent. Good idea.
See it on the right? So it's at the very back of the museum. So when you're visiting the museum, it's, you know, it sometimes it's a little hidden, but it is back here, and that's where I am. Okay. Awesome. So I'll get started. Maybe Vincent, if you could stop sharing your screen, if that's okay. Okay, perfect. So now you can see my face, everyone, and of course you can see our one of the specimens that we're going to be talking about. So I just wanted to give a quick tip. There's a little option in the top left corner to pin video. So if you're noticing that like my video is quite small and you can't see the details, you can pin it, and that way you can see not really me, but you can see the specimens a little better. So hi everyone, hope you're doing well. I see some familiar names in the participants, some of our volunteers. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be spending maybe about 20 minutes with talking about some of the specimens, maybe a little bit less, and we'll be answering lots of questions as well. And what I wanted to do was actually spend a couple minutes talking about the Discovery Lab. So I know that some of you are familiar, but it might be new to many of you. So I wanted to talk about what this space is and what we do here. So as you can see, this room has lots of cabinets behind us. I have one of them open. That is the cabinet with the herbarium specimens. So that's where we keep our plants and fungi. And we have a cabinet for each of the collections. Let me see if I can move my camera just a little bit. There we go. So we have a cabinet for each of the collections. You can see the tetrapods, the insects with a big butterfly over there. And these cabinets are filled with educational specimens. So our whole museum has specimens, and Vincent mentioned earlier, we've got about 2.1 million specimens, including that huge blue whale. The specimens that are kept in the museum are used for research. So it means that they might have data associated with them. They can be used by the curators here at the museum. They can be used by one of the researchers that Vincent mentioned work in the research center, or it could be sent somewhere else, or they could be scientists visiting from other parts of the world to study those particular specimens. We can't really touch those specimens. and they have to be kept in a specific environment. But the specimens in this room are education specimens. So they're a little different in the sense that we can actually touch them and get up close. Usually these are specimens without data. So these are ones that might not be very useful for research. So they're given to us, they're given to the education department so that we can use them in our programs, we can show them to people. And normally when the museum is open, people are able to come into the Discovery Lab, and our wonderful volunteers will take these specimens out and show them to others. Unfortunately, nowadays, because of the circumstances, we're not able to let people touch specimens, which is unfortunate, but we can do these virtual programs and bring these specimens to you through Zoom. And that's what I'm going to do today. So I firstly wanted to show you a few specimens just to get you thinking about what kinds of specimens we have here. And then I have a few that I'm going to highlight. And I'm specifically going to be showing you some predators today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about how they eat. Okay. All right. So maybe we'll start with a tetrapod specimen. So Vincent mentioned tetrapods are four-limbed creatures, things like mammals and birds, reptiles and amphibians. Does anyone have a guess as to what kind of tetrapod? So feel free to put it in the chat if you'd like. Do you have a guess as to what kind of animal this might be? It's a skull. It's got some sharp teeth. What do we think? I'll give you a hint. It's related to a pet that some of you might have. Oh, Andy's got it. Excellent. Cougar Skull. Perfect. So this is one of our beloved specimens, a cougar skull. I'm going to gently open the mouth so you can see the sharp teeth that it has. I really love that their nose kind of has a heart shape, but it's a common predator. So this is one type of specimen that we would have at the museum and in the lab. We would have the bony parts of the specimen, part of its skeleton. Let's do a plant specimen. So this would be part of the herbarium. In fact, this actually came from that cabinet that you see open back there. This is a pressed plant. This is actually a red flowering currant, which is a common flower. And this one is really beloved by hummingbirds. And this specimen is really cool because if you look up close, you can see lichen growing on the branches. And lichen is a different type of organism. So this is actually really interesting because the specimen has two organisms in one. So it's really cool. And then I have another specimen. I have an insect. If you have a guess for what this might be, you can put it in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of glare. I'll move it a little closer. You can see it's black and white. It's quite big. Oh, really big beetle. Yes, that's right. This is a Goliath beetle. It is one of the biggest insects on the planet. By weight, it's definitely one of the biggest beetles. So this one is a really interesting one. And I did want to mention that our specimens, for the most part, are prepared in-house. So we have a big team of staff as well as volunteers. Actually, it's mostly volunteers who do this, who prepare these specimens for us. And then after actually preparing the specimen, we also have these beautiful custom boxes made by our staff as well. So this beetle is arranged in a really beautiful way where it actually looks like it's alive. So that's really cool. Awesome. Okay. So I wanted to show you a few examples of these specimens before I get into the ones I wanted to talk about. I did just want to say one more thing just before we move on. These are organisms that are no longer alive. They are dead, but the museum does not go out and kill these specimens. These are specimens that must have died in one way or the other. Sometimes they might have died of natural causes. They might have died in an accident. And then the museum is able to acquire them. So we do not go out and kill the specimens, but they are dead. So there we go. Okay, so I have 3 predators that I'd like to tell you about. We'll start with the one right here. Oh, actually, before we do that, we also have specimens in jars. The octopus looks really good on camera, so I wanted to highlight it. Some of our specimens are preserved in alcohol. And so our small little octopus is one of them. We also have lots of fish in jars as well. And we just have ethanol that we preserve them in. There we go. Okay. All right. So we have our owl specimen. This is actually a great horned owl. I'm going to lift it so you can actually see the bottom. This is preserved in a really interesting way, where there's actually a little tree trunk at the bottom, so it looks like it's alive. And there's something really unique about this specimen compared to some of the other ones we have at the museum. It has eyes. Normally, the specimens that we have here, they're just stuffed. So the way that they're prepared is that their body is opened up, everything squishy is taken out, all the bones are taken out, and then inside there's just cotton and a type of stuffing. And that's what happened to this bird as well. Eyes are squishy. And so as part of the cleaning out process, part of the preparation process, the eyes are removed as well. And so for some of our specimens, you just see cotton wool sticking out of the eyes. But sometimes they get little plastic eyes. So that is what this specimen got. I mentioned earlier that the specimens that are used for research usually have data, and ones that we have here for education usually don't, and that's how they actually end up in our collection. But we do have some information about some specimens. So I was looking in our database earlier. This particular specimen is a female, and she was about 4 years old when she died. And like actually a lot of other specimens, she died in an accident. So she actually hit a car, and that's how she passed away. And then she was able to be acquired by the museum, and that's how we got her. So owls are predators, and actually I'll move the specimen a little closer. You can see these big talons on this particular specimen. So they can eat all kinds of birds and mammals. And I have an example of a specimen that they might want to eat. So this is a North American deer mouse. I'm just trying to figure out how to put less glare. There you go. You can see its little face. And you can see that it's got white eyes because it's the cotton wool that is sticking out. So this would be an example of something that this particular owl would eat. But it's covered in fur. Sometimes they eat small birds, and those are covered in feathers. This animal also has a lot of bones. They're really hard to digest. And so what owls actually do is they actually have 2 stomachs. They actually create this thing called a pellet. So all the digestible parts, the meaty parts, will go through one stomach and be digested. But then all of the sort of furry parts and the parts that are not that easily digestible, they go into the other area, and then the owls are able to create a pellet. And what's really interesting about the pellet is that you can actually dissect it and see what the owl's been eating. So I actually want to show a video of an owl throwing up a pellet. Oh, sorry, you can see what's coming up, spoilers. I found this really adorable video of a great horned owl chick. So this is a baby great horned owl, not quite a baby, a little bit older. And at about the 8-second mark, you will notice something coming out of its mouth. So let's see what they have. Okay, it's getting ready. And oh, there we go. Did you catch the little the thing coming out of the owl's mouth? So that's a pellet. Pellets can usually take about a couple of hours, usually like maybe about 10 hours to form, and then they throw it up. And this owl actually looks quite happy that it's got rid of the pellet, because I'm sure it must be a little annoying to have it. You'll notice though that this chick looks different than this owl here. It's quite downy, and that's true for birds in general when they're young. Their feathers are soft and downy, and as they get older, they no longer look like that. Awesome. Okay, I could watch this video all day. It's a very cute owl chick. Awesome. Okay, I wanted to check if there were any questions. Oh.
Yeah, looks like we have a question from Nicole. Can owls eat another meal before they get rid of a pellet?
That's a good question. They do have two stomachs, and I would think no. But there might be exceptions. Sorry, I don't really know, but we can look that answer up.
Okay. I guess that's the tricky part about getting rid of waste from the same hole that your food goes in.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But it's kind of cool. Here at the museum, we've done activities before where we've dissected pellets. And I just want to say that a fresh pellet, like the one that came out of the great horn, this great horned owl baby chick, it probably has a lot of bacteria, so it's not a good idea to touch a fresh one. But you can buy clean ones from like science supply companies, and we've definitely dissected some of those before here at the museum, so they're really cool.
So Nancy's pointing out sometimes you find multiple skulls in a pellet, so possibly more than one meal per pellet.
Right. Oh, there we go. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Ooh, and so Nicole pointed out on a quick search, a pellet may impede eating, so it would depend. Andy has a very good question. Why do owls require putting out pellets after eating furry animals? Well, it seems other birds of prey that also eat the same kinds don't need to form pellets.
Yeah. So I do think that, like hawks, for example, they also form like something similar to a pellet. But it's definitely more common in owls.
Yeah. Nancy points out other birds of prey do indeed make pellets, as you're saying. It's just owls are the most famous for it.
There you go. Owls are beloved, and I instantly gravitated to picking the owl specimen when we actually have lots of other great ones. I actually, before we move on, because I do have lots of other things to show, I did pick one of the smaller owl specimens. This is a pygmy owl, a northern pygmy owl specimen that we have. It's much smaller compared to the great horned owl, and even just in the lab, we've got at least 4 species of owls represented, so we have quite a few. Come see.
Yeah, a couple more questions. So Sheila pointed out other raptors also tend to rip and tear at their prey as opposed to eating it whole, so they'd have less need to pelletify their food. And Chloe asks, the records show the owl is female. Are there any visible ways to tell that?
So as far as I know, I think it might be a little hard to tell, like just on this specimen, but I think when they would have acquired it, they might have been able to see like reproductive organs, especially when they prepared it. So they would have been able to tell. But I think it's a little hard. Okay. All right. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just gonna go on to our next specimen, something from the ocean. And I wanted to actually show something that I mentioned earlier. I said that we have folks here who prepare the specimens, but there are also folks who create these beautiful displays for them. And this is actually a really great box that we use for our tours. And this one has a few marine invertebrates represented. And there's a few snails. And I specifically want to talk about an animal called the moon snail, or the Lewis's moon snail, which is which is very common here off our coast. And it looks like this. And I'll actually remove this from the box. We don't usually do this, but I'll remove it so you can see. When this animal is alive, it lives inside the shell. I'm just gonna stop sharing for a minute. I do have a video to show you, but we'll go back to it in a bit. And this animal actually has a little trapdoor when it's alive. It's called an operculum. A lot of snails have it. And this is one of the biggest snails here off our coast. And it does something really interesting. In order to eat its food, so it is a carnivorous snail, it actually drills holes into the shell of its prey. And so I have a specimen of a butter clam, which is also, a little neck clam. And I'll hold it up. And maybe you can see there's a little hole right there. That was drilled by the moon snail. And the way that happens is all snails have this thing called a radula, which they can use in different ways. Sometimes they use it to scrape algae off rocks. So for example, I have an abalone specimen here, and they eat algae, so they can use their radula to scrape algae off rocks. But moon snails use it to drill holes in their prey. So I'd like to show you a little video of this. I found this video really interesting because I personally had never seen a moon snail radula this up close, so I thought it was really interesting. Okay. Oh, there we go. This is the moon snail as you would find it on the beach. So this squishy part is called a mantle, so you can see how expansive it is. This moon snail that we have is quite small, but you can see it can grow bigger. In fact, it might be one of the biggest snails here off our coast. Here's what it looks like on the underside. And then this video will show the radula and how it's able to drill holes. So we'll watch a little bit. You can see the snail moving. You can see little tentacles here. They're almost like little antennae. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Let's try that again. Okay, sorry about that. Technology. Here we go. It's like moving very, very slowly, almost like a snail, because it's a snail. And I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. So that's what it would look like in the water. And so they're showing its prey, which would be any type of clam, or bivalve. They could eat things like mussels as well. And then they're going to show the radula. So there it is. You can see it's like this brown part on the underside. And then what you see there, the little sharp bits, are its teeth. And so it can use those to drill that hole that I showed you earlier in the shell. It's extremely slow. It drills about 0.5 millimeter per day, but that's usually enough for a small clam. That's enough to kill it and eat it. And I'm just going to pause this here for a second. The other thing they do is that they will also secrete acid. So they will secrete hydrochloric acid as a way to make that hole a little bit more defined and bigger, but also as a way to actually kill the animal on the inside. I really like how perfect the circle is, the little hole that they drilled. But I also think it's really interesting because if you find a shell like that, you can actually tell who has been eating dinner. So who is the predator of that particular clam. The other thing I wanted to show you about moon snails is these beautiful structures that they make. This is called a sand collar. And it's basically where they lay their eggs. And so you can see this right here. It's called a sand collar because it looks a little bit like a shirt collar. And so the females, they actually will, when they produce their eggs, they actually secrete this gel, and they mix the gel with sand, and then they create a little barrier of the gel and the sand, and they sandwich their eggs in between, and that's how they create a little sand collar. So those are also very distinctive. So if you go, for example, on Vancouver Island, if you see some moon snails, you might also see these sand collars around it. So there you go. All right. So that's the moon snail. I'll put it back in its box. Are there any questions about the moon snail or what it might eat? We're good for now? Okay, all right. Let's talk about the last specimen, which are some sharks. Okay, I'll stop sharing so we can go back to video. Awesome. Oh, there we go. So we talked about predators, we talked about the owl, we talked about the moon snail. I included the moon snail because I think I, for example, used to think that snails were mostly herbivorous, but turns out a few of them are quite vicious predators, which I think is really interesting. But then when I was trying to think of more predators, of course I had to pick a shark because sharks are, that's what they're known for. And we have some really great shark specimens in the lab. And I have some photos of these sharks that I'll show you in a second. So the two jaws that I have that I'd like to show you or tell you about they belong to a shark called the Dusky Shark. And so this is the kind of shark jaw that we imagine in our head. Kind of big, really pointy, lots of teeth. But in contrast, here's a jaw from another shark. And this is a little different. The teeth are quite small, the teeth are quite flat. This is from a zebra shark. So I'd like to show you pictures of both of them because I think that really helpful in sort of visualizing what kind of lives these sharks lead. So let's go back. Okay. All right. So this first picture is of the Dusky Shark, which is the one that I have right here. And you can see it's quite big. I mean, looks a little bit like it could be in like a, shark movie or a shark cartoon. And if you look up close.
Yes, a very shark-shaped shark.
Yes, it's funny though, because I think most of you would know this, there's like over 500 species of sharks. And we also have, sharks that look nothing like sharks. But this one is a very, looks like a shark. I'm just holding this really up close to the camera so you can see some of the teeth. They're quite sharp and they're also serrated. And so that helps the shark eat lots of big fish, for example. It can eat some marine mammals as well, things like seals. And this shark has a really interesting distribution. It's found most sharks are found in warmer waters. So it's found in the Caribbean. It's found off the coast of Africa. But it's also found as north as places like New Brunswick. It's been spotted off the coast of the east coast of the US. So I find that really fascinating that sometimes sharks do come really up north, even though they don't spend a lot of time there. And in a couple minutes, I'll actually tell you about some sharks that live here off our coast. The other shark that I wanted to show you, the one that these jaws belong to, is one that I don't think looks very much like a shark. at least not in my mind. So this is the zebra shark.
Zebras famous for their spots.
Pardon me?
Zebras famous for spots.
Yes, I don't, that's why common names are not something that we really encourage. It's a very cute looking shark. It almost looks a bit like a cartoon character. I love its mouth. And actually, if you look at the picture on the left, you can see a little bit of the bottom. Oh, I'm gonna have to keep a tight grip on this because it's a little loose in its box. You can see a little bit of those bottom teeth. And so I'm gonna hold this really close to the camera. I hope that you can see it. This shark has teeth as well, but they're very, very small. And they're actually quite smooth in one direction. And so it's not using its teeth the way that you would anticipate a shark doing. So it's not ripping up mammals or big fish or anything like that. But it's actually mostly using these teeth to crush up marine invertebrates, so things with shells. It's crushing those shells. It's eating the animal on the inside, and that's sort of how it's living its life. It's also a smaller shark as well compared to the other one, and you can tell that by the size of the jaws. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of diversity within sharks. The picture on the right has a little fish attached to the top of the zebra shark. And that's a remora. Many of you would know this. Remoras are sharks with little suction cups on their heads, and they love to hitch rides. So they're little hitchhikers, and they will often attach themselves to different bigger animals, including whales, including big sharks. I'm just looking at the chat right now, and Andy has mentioned that the juvenile zebra sharks have stripes, but they lose them as they turn into adults. So that's a really good point. I was reading, when I was reading up on these, I was also reading about leopard sharks as well, which are a different type of shark, and it's the same sort of thing. The babies actually have the spots, and that's why they're called leopard sharks, but as adults, they don't really have them. Which is very, very confusing, but it's all good. I did want to tell you one more thing about dusky sharks. So we'll just go back to that picture. I found out that they do something very interesting. So most sharks, so many sharks, like many fish, lay eggs. But dusky sharks actually give live birth, which is really interesting. So the females are pregnant, very similar to how mammals would give live birth, and then babies come out and they go on and live their life. So I found that really interesting. How sharks are extremely diverse in both their shape, but also their reproductive habits and how they have their babies. Okay.
And Nicole's pointing out our local dogfish, which is a kind of shark, also gives live birth.
Yes. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Okay. Speaking of local sharks, I wanted to include this little image here. This is from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans here in Canada, and it shows the kind of sharks that are found here off our coast. We're not going to see zebra sharks off our coast. We might see a dusky shark or two, but they're not that common. But we do have sharks that are common here off our coast. And so there's some of them here. The spiny dogfish is a good example of one. Sleeper shark, the blue shark. So lots of really cool ones. Okay, all right. So I have one more shark-related thing to share, and after that, I'm happy to answer questions. And then maybe for 5 minutes, if anyone has any specific specimens that they would like to see, I'm happy to pull them out if they don't require a ladder and they're relatively easy to get. So let's talk about the Megalodon. So one of our favorite specimens here at the museum, or here in the lab, at least one of my favorite specimens, is this Megalodon tooth that we have. It is huge, as you can see, and this is just one tooth. And compared to, the many, many small ones that are on these shark jaws, the Megalodon, of course, it was a shark that lived millions of years ago. It is now extinct. And it was really big. And so you can see it's so big that there was a person could sit in the jaw. Sharks are cartilaginous fish. They don't have skeletons like we do. So all we really have of the Megalodon are its teeth. And there was also one vertebrae that was found once, but really the only thing that's found are the teeth. And the one very important thing about shark teeth that I have not mentioned is that sharks lose their teeth all the time. And that's why it's so easy to find shark teeth. And that's why we have so many Megalodon teeth that we've found as well. So there you go. One of our favorite specimens, once again, at least one of my favorite specimens, but I'm sure the other interpreters would agree as well. And of course, it's a fossil. You can tell because it's a different color than these little teeth here. So I just wanted to show this because if we're talking about predators, it would be remiss to not talk about the Megalodon. Okay, so wanted to share some predators. I will stop sharing, but I wanted to see if anyone had questions or if they had things they'd like to see, any specimens that any of the volunteers have missed, or anybody else who hasn't been in the museum. I'm also just catching up on the chat.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe a fungi or a lichen.
Okay, all right. I will be back. I'll grab two fungi that I actually, one of these I had planned to talk about, but then I decided not to out of interest of time. This is a fungi that I've been reading a lot about recently. This is called a red banded polypore. It's a conch, so it would grow like on the outside of a tree. And this particular specimen is really interesting because it's actually got another fungus on it. It's got a parasite on it. It's kind of cool that, fungi have their own parasites. This is from what I understand, this is also a mushroom that's used medicinally, and people can make teas out of it because it grows on trees. It's not tasty to eat because it's just tastes a little bit like a tree, perhaps, or it's quite woody rather. But people make tea out of it apparently to cure some ailments. And then the other little mushroom I grabbed was, actually, I'll hold it up. Who has a guess what this is? I'll give you a hint. It's a lot more red when it's alive.
So it looks quite different. Okay.
Yes, I know. It's a little deceptive when it's dried. So this is the fly agaric, the Amanita. And this is the one that's like a classic sort of fairy tale mushroom. So it's the kind that you see in cartoons. It's very bright red. Shouldn't eat it.
Yeah,
I mean, that goes for most mushrooms. Don't eat them unless you really know what they are.
I have a question from Mia. Her 6-year-old is wondering, do you have an anteater favorite specimen of his?
Fortunately, we don't have an anteater as is, but I'm trying to think of some other things that might eat ants. Maybe a bird that might eat ants. We'll go get that.
But yeah, anteater. That's a good choice. Yeah, so no specimen in our Discovery Lab of anteaters, but pretty neat one. I will say that the owl standing there looks like it's ready to take flight at any moment.
This is the northern flicker. They can eat a bunch of things, including insects. So they might eat an ants. This one is an orange shafted one. It's got some orange feathers. You can see it right there. I actually saw a northern flicker in a park not that long ago, so they're pretty cool.
Nicole's pointing out she sees them eating ants all the time. So
there we go.
It's not an anteater. It is an ant eater.
That's right. That's right.
And Nancy's pointing out the anteater has a long snout. Another long-snouted animal might be a mammoth.
Okay.
Now, we don't have its
Excellent.
snout per se, but we do have its tooth.
Awesome. Okay. So one of our fossils is this mammoth tooth. And mammoths were a type of elephant that lived here in North America. And of course, they've been extinct for a while. And they have two types of teeth. So their incisors, the front teeth, were their tusks. And then they had molars on the back. So we have molars as well, which are the flat teeth at the back that help us eat plants, or help us grind rather. They had 4 molars. And so this is the top of one of the molars. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be one of the ones. And this is just the top of it. So there would actually be quite a big tooth underneath. We don't normally take things out of boxes, but I'm going to lift it up very gently just to show you. So this specimen has, you can see the top here, and then this is actually polished at the bottom, so you can see what the surface would look like if it was sliced. So there we go. Yeah. So an animal with a long snout like an anteater, except much bigger, and this is what its tooth looks like. Awesome. Maybe one more. I'm just looking at the time. We've got, okay, it's almost 1:50, so maybe if anyone has any last specimens they'd like to see.
Not seeing any.
Oh.
Nancy's asking for one of your favorites, and Sheila wants to see the killer worm.
Perfect. Let's do the worm as the last one. Awesome. I think we've looked at mostly my favorite specimens. I mean, in my presentation today, I had a strong bias towards specimens I really like. This is a good last one to end on. This is a sea mouse. It was called Killer by the person who collected it because it's quite big. It's in a jar, and it's just an interesting, just a very interesting looking animal. So it is a marine worm that would live in the ocean. It's very, it's quite furry, as you can tell. And the one thing that's not so visible on camera, but I can see it because I'm looking at the jar. Oh, actually, maybe you can see it right over here. Their bristles, the bristles on their body are iridescent. And so even though this animal lives in the ocean, when light passes through their translucent bristles, the little hair on the side, they're almost kind of like a prism. And you can see all kinds of colors. Let me just see if
yes, it does kind of look like a furry Pac-Man or something eldritch and
that's right.
Horrible.
Yeah, they're quite. I'll show you the underside as well. That's what they would look like, and they'd be scurrying along on the ocean floor, perhaps. There you go. Awesome.
Yeah, Mio says thanks for showing those
Aw.
specimens. Marianne on Facebook loves your selection of specimens.
Aw. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I just want to be mindful of time. So if there are any last thoughts or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But we will wrap up very soon. If not. So just a quick note about the Discovery Lab. Unfortunately, it is not open currently. So we do want everyone to come visit the museum, and on the 21st, we will be officially open to the public. So please do come. Fortunately, the Discovery Lab is closed off, so we can't come close to the specimens or touch them. But we still have lots of really amazing things to see on the floor. Yeah, so awesome.
All right, thanks, Kashifa. Let's just pull up. There we go. So yeah, thank you again. So yeah, I believe we had our last questions.
Vincent, I think we can see your notes.
Oh, interesting.
Doesn't matter. It's okay.
All right. Well, nope, that's the wrong button. Well, yeah, if anyone has any questions, type them into the chat box. Otherwise, we want to thank you for joining us, supporting the Beaty Biodiversity Museum. We appreciate that. Thank you to all of you who donated on our website when registering. We really appreciate that. It really helps us out, and thank you. And yeah, next week, we will, on the 22nd of July, again at 1 p.m., we will meet our new director. So we're excited to introduce Dr. Quentin Cronk, our new director here at the Biodiversity Museum. So get a chance to meet him next week. So we have a link on our bdmuseum.ubc.ca website. You can, of course, connect with us online on social media. So just Facebook, Instagram at BT Museum. And if you're looking for more online resources, just bit.ly/BD@home. And we'd love to hear your input about our online session. So whether it was today or other BD at homes, fill in a survey we have at bit.ly/BD survey. So once again, we want to just thank everyone for joining us. And yeah, thanks for being a part of this. If anyone had any other questions in the chat. Let's see, we got a few thanks, Kashifa, so I just want to point those out. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Sheila mentions that the sea mouse is a predator that eats worms bigger than itself.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.